Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. 41 years ago today, the outrageous attack on the Darbar Sahib was well underway. On today's show, we look at some of those events that shocked the world when news finally did leak out. We'll take a look at the many gatherings taking place around the world to remember those events, including how even mainstream news outlets in the West are now covering these rallies and marches. An important point that actually highlights just how the world is increasingly asking questions about India's shameful past. And news out of Punjab that for the first time the local BJP acknowledged the victims of the attack as martyrs. A simple word that carries with it huge implications of guilt, but for that acknowledgement to be rapidly withdrawn. Was that as soon as BJP headquarters in Delhi realised just what they'd done? Well, joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Perspectives. Remember, you are just as important to the show as we are, so get those messages in. We love reading all of your comments, and don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed, and James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world, and we will of course, as always, take a look at loads of your great comments at the end of the show which have been pouring in, so thank you for those and do stay tuned. Right, James, let's get underway looking at 1984. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
We're going to take a look back at some of the events of 1984 and some of the historical data and footage, and just really remind people what it is that we need to be aware of and what it is that we are keeping all of the victims of 1984 in our memories, in our hearts, and of course in the steadfast need for Khalistan to be its own sovereign nation. ਰਾਜ ਤੇ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ
ਜਿਸ ਪਿਤਾ ਨੇ 10 ਲੱਖ ਦੇ ਘੇਰੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ ਕੇਵਲ 40 ਸਿੰਘਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਾਲ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਤੇ ਦੰਦ ਖੱਟੇ ਕੀਤੇ ਸੀ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਘੇਰਾ ਵੀ ਨਾ ਪੈ ਸਕੇ ਜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਜਰਾ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਕਤੀ ਘੱਟ ਹੋਵੇਗੀ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਮਰੱਥ ਗੁਰੂ ਸੀ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਪੁੱਤਰ ਹਾਂ। पर इन्ना चेता जरूर रखियो, इरादा तो भावें अज है नहीं, पर जिहड़ा चुकन आया वो अपना खप्पण जरूर सिर ते बन के आयो, खाली नहीं किसी ने मुड़ना। तो चेता रख लियो, इस हरमंदर साहिब की बाबत चाहे कोई बीबी है, चाहे कोई बच्चा, चाहे गुरु का कोई सिंध है, टुतरा टुतरा हो जाएगा, पर हरमंदर साहिब की बेअदबी नूं कदे बर्दाश्त नहीं करेगा। तो मैं नौजवानों को भी बेनती करांगा, रखनी शांति है, पर शांति की कोई हद हदूद है। तकी तगी ते बैठना शांति है, पिंजरे च बंद रह के सीस कटा लेना शांति है। हुण तो इस नूं अग लग गई है जिस
तो 19 साल में देखो मैं विडो भी बन गई थी, 3 बच्चे भी हो गए, पर मैंने पता नहीं कैसे कैसे अपने बच्चे पाले हैं। लोगों के घरों में मैंने बर्तन भी मांजे हैं, मैंने बड़े मुश्किल से अपने बच्चे पाले। कोई नहीं पूछने आया कि तुम कहाँ हो, क्या हो, तुम्हारे बच्चे कैसे पल रहे हैं, जा क्या है।
जो भी मिल रहा था मारने वाला ही मिल रहा था, बचाने वाला कोई भी नहीं था। ऐसे जल रहे थे जैसे कोई आग के मशाल जलते हैं ना, ऐसे जिंदे जल रहे थे, तड़प रहे थे। 3 मेरे भाई और 3 मेरी बहनें 7वीं में थी। मेरी मम्मी तो अपने आदमी को और अपने बेटे को ही रोती रहती थी। बाकी बहन भाइयों को फिर मैंने संभाला, मैंने लोगों के बर्तन भी मांजे। कुल मिला के मतलब आज तक हम दुखी हैं, सुखी नहीं है। सुख तो हमने देखा ही नहीं, हमारी किस्मत में ही नहीं लिखा शायद भगवान ने।
यही बचाव था हमारा कि एक दूसरे को हम देख के मतलब जिए। भाई इसके साथ हो गया तो ये भी तो जी रही है, मेरे साथ हो गया तो जी रही है।
एक रो रही है तो दूसरी उसको दिलासा देती थी, बेटा मत रो, मैं भी तेरे जैसी हो गई हूँ, मेरा भी बेटा गया है, मेरा भी आदमी गया है।
बस वही है ना, एक दूसरे को देख के जब जाके हमने मतलब ये जिंदगी पार करी। हमने अकेले होते तो हम भी मर जाते तड़प तड़प के कि क्या हुआ हमारे साथ।
बाकी जख्म तो अभी भी ताजा है, जख्म नहीं खत्म होएंगे, जख्म नहीं भूलेंगे। जब तक जिंदे रहेंगे तब तक याद रहेंगे।
औरतें डरती थी, कोर्ट में जाने के लिए भी डरती थी। मैं उनको कहती थी कि भाई तुम पहले मरी पड़ी हो, हम कहाँ हैं जिंदे। हम जब हमारे सब कुछ लुट गया, मर गए, आदमी मार दिए, तो तुम कहाँ हो जिंदे। तुम भी तो जाओ ना कोर्ट में, मैं तुम्हारे साथ। एक एक को घर से निकाल के कोर्ट में मैं उनके साथ जाती थी गाड़ी में।
Darshan has played a vital role, not only as a witness in the case against former Congress Minister H.K.L. Bhagat, but also as an active advocate for securing jobs for the other widows, especially when they were initially being offered positions as sweepers. She protested on the streets to demand their rights, even as perpetrators continued attacking her and tried to bribe her multiple times.
85 में हमें क्वार्टर मिले थे ना वहाँ पे तिलक विहार में, और 85 में मेरे सम्मन आए थे। जैसे मेरे सम्मन आते थे ना कि आज मैं जा रही हूँ, और 2-3 सिख मतलब सरदार थे, वो आ जाते थे मेरे घर में। आप जा रहे हो बहन जी, तुसी जा रहे हो कोर्ट? मैं कहा हाँ जी वीर जी जा रही हैं मैं। तो फिर थोड़े दिनों के बाद में अटैची लेके आ गए पैसों की, 100 के नोट थे उसमें पूरे, कि आप इतना कुछ कर रहे हो, वो है या पैसे ले लो, आप मत जाओ कोर्ट में, मत गवाही दो, आप पैसे ले। आज अगर मैं आज पैसा ले लेती ना, तो मैं शहीदों का जो सौदा कर लेती ना, तो ना मैं सुखी रहती ना मेरे बच्चे सुखी रहते, कभी नहीं सुखी रहते। मैंने कहा आप सिख हो के मेरे को ऐसे बोल रहे हो, एक लेडीज़ को मैं क्या डराने के लिए आए हो घर में। और मैंने कहा ऐसा है, मैं पैसा लेके भी और कोर्ट में जाऊंगी गवाही देने के लिए, और पैसा भी रख लूंगी मैं क्या। और नहीं तो मैं क्या 12 बंदे मरे, मेरे एक बंदा वापस ला के दो, मैं अपना आदमी नहीं मांग रही मैं क्या, मेरे एक बंदे ही ला के दे दो, कुछ कोई भी ला के दे दो मैं क्या।
16 साल ਦਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਵੀਰ ਝੋਨੇ ਨੂੰ ਪਾਣੀ ਲਾਉਂਦਾ, ਬਲਦੇਵ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੇ ਫੜ ਕੇ ਗੋਲੀਆਂ ਮਾਰ ਕੇ ਮਾਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ।
ਘਰ ਵਾਲੇ ਦਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਸੁਖਪਾਲ ਸਿੰਘ ਤੇ 1394 ਦਾ ਮੇਰੇ ਘਰ ਵਾਲੇ ਨੂੰ ਘਰੋਂ ਚੁੱਕਿਆ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਉਦੋਂ ਦੇ ਗਏ ਜੇ ਮੁੜ ਕੇ ਵਾਪਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਏ।
ਕਿ ਜਰਮਾਨਿਓ ਘੱਟੋ ਘੱਟ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਦੇ ਦਿਓ ਕਿ ਕਿਹੜੀ ਲਾਸ਼ ਕਿਹਦੀ ਹੈ, ਕਿ ਕੁਛ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਘੱਟੋ ਘੱਟ ਇਹ ਦੱਸ ਦਿਓ ਕਿ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਘਾਟਾ ਹੀਰਾ, ਕਿਹੜੀ ਸ਼ਮਸ਼ਾਨ ਘਾਟ
Once again, I mean, it is just an atrocious time that a government and their military takes the lives of their own citizens, regardless as to what the differences may have been. As most people are aware, when it comes to the right side of history and knowing the truth, that the people within the Golden Temple sat diligently waiting and hoping to wait out the military to resolve it in a peaceful manner. They had made many attempts to keep the communication open, to bring peace and resolution to the situation, and that was what the goal was, until the Indian Army opened fire and started brutally killing not just the men inside the Gurdwara who they were targeting, but they also opened fire killing women and children that were on a pilgrimage. And this is why we need to really make sure that the world can never forget those atrocious events of 1984, Angus.
Yeah, it's every time we even just review some of those pictures and videos of the time of the events of 1984, it is just shocking. It just brings back the horror of those events and actually the enormity of those events. I mean, of course, it still has resonance. Here we are 41 years ago, still talking about it. But yeah, again, it's just when you review just the sheer scale and the sheer psychological scale of what was unfolded in those few days of June, it is absolutely mind-blowing. And we mustn't forget, of course, there were tens of thousands of men, women and children gathering in the complex to celebrate the 3rd of June. It was an annual event, and of course all these families had turned up with children, don't forget, just expecting a few days of glorious, happy celebrations and getting together. It was a community gathering in this holiest of sites, to be suddenly rounded up and the doors are essentially sealed, and they find themselves trapped. And then a few days later, or hours later in fact, shells and ammunition rounds start pouring in and killing them and killing their families as they sat around or then cowered in the corners and tried to find anywhere just to shelter from the incoming bullets. I mean, it's just astounding. And then of course there's the other element. We have Bhindranvale and his followers, who had been holed up there for quite some time. And of course, once the army then turned their guns on them, after they'd sort of mopped up as many of the civilians, the innocent civilians as they could, they then turned the guns on Bhindranvale. And what followed over the next 2 or 3 days was just this absolutely heroic, one-sided stand by Bhindranvale and his followers. And they had said, look, no, you will not take us alive. And they were good to their words. And they became these well-celebrated martyrs. And celebrate, I don't know if that's the right word, but certainly the legacy was massive. And the impact of that last stand is absolutely, as I say, it resonates 41 years later. And Bhindranvale's picture, his portrait now adorns every Gurdwara around the diaspora and beyond, for a very good reason. It's because what he stood for. And ironically, he didn't actually at that time stand for Khalistan. He just stood for the basic human rights of the Sikh community that had been trampled on, had been restricted, and increasingly so by the Indian government, particularly by the Gandhi dynasty. And it all stemmed originally from the early 70s, the Anandpur Resolution, where again the Sikh community had got together and just presented this list of basic demands to Delhi, saying, look, we have to have a bit more control over our own decision making. You've got to allow us access to even our basic irrigation rights. We've got to be allowed to take water from our own rivers to feed our own crops. It's stuff as basic as that they were being denied. So that's why Bhindranvale existed as the person that he was. That's what it was all about. The Gandhi dynasty, the Brahmins, effectively the Brahmin controllers of India, absolutely hated the fact that Bhindranvale was rallying the resistance to Delhi control. That he was this focal point, and he was succeeding in the same way that Amritpal Singh has succeeded in modern days. And what's happened to Amritpal Singh? It's history repeating itself all over again. And this is what Bhindranvale was. And what followed over the following days was just absolutely shocking. And then, of course, what followed for the rest of the year, the genocide in November. That year really does stand in Indian history as just a shameful stain. So yeah, James, I think it's as I say, it really is quite emotional to see these pictures again, and just a sheer, shocking, sacrilegious outrage to pour just basic weaponry, to turn an army's weaponry on the holiest site of Sikh is just so offensive on every level. It is beyond belief. And of course, we must year after year remember these events. And I would point our audience, and I'll put a link in the comments below. 2 years ago, I did a series of 4 full-length, feature-length episodes where I analysed hour by hour almost the events of those first few days of June, what unfolded, and it is absolutely shocking. But it is also, in the same breath, utterly heroic of what Bindranwale and his team did to stand up to this incredible onslaught, James.
Absolutely. And again, the people who are still referring to this as, you know, the start of the Sikh riots, again, they're mislabeling it so intensely. But again, that is a narrative of the India government to try and whitewash the truth behind what actually happened in those days. So with that said, Angus, there are many events that are taking place starting from yesterday right on through June, and this will mark the memory of those people, that were impacted by the events of 1984, but it also is a reminder of the demand or the desire to have a sovereign nation by the name of Khalistan for the Sikh people, run by the Sikh people, and open to everybody. Not, you thought I was going to say for the Sikh people only, but no, it's for everybody because they are a welcoming and friendly people. They always reach out and try to make people the best that they can be, no matter what faith they are. And of that, we'll take a look. There have been a few events, but again, we need to also remember from the different perspectives. And this clip that I'm going to show now just kind of highlights some of what was posted online, as well as some of the events that you'll see in the backdrop. And thank you to all of those who are on social media sharing the historic events of 1984, trying to raise awareness. Of course, we saw an influx last year as the 40th anniversary, but this year being the 41st, again, we expect to see a lot of support, a lot of people, but again, we want to encourage people to share it on social media because that gets the word out. That educates non-Sikhs about the atrocities that happened, the genocide that happened, and the fact that so few people have been held accountable, even to this day, for the massacre of thousands upon thousands of Sikhs and other minorities in India, but most significantly in the Punjab in 1984. As we look back on the events of 1984, we should never refer to them and remember them as the Sikh riots. Instead, we should call them exactly what they were, and that was a genocide against Sikhs throughout Punjab. These events happened at the hands of the Indian government and Hindus throughout the Punjab region. On June the 1st, the SikhCoalition.org posted on their website, "Today, the Sikh Coalition joined Sangit around the world in marking 41 years since an inflection point in modern history. On this day in 1984, the Indian government launched Operation Bluestar, a coordinated assault on Darbar Sahib, also known as the Golden Temple, and dozens of other gurdwaras throughout the Punjab. This atrocity, which claimed the lives of thousands of Sikhs, served as a prelude to the Sikh genocide later that same year. Both events in turn marked the beginning of a years-long campaign of state-sponsored repression that included targeted killings, coordinated mass mob violence, and disappearances, plus more. Commemorating the lasting consequences of Operation Bluestar, the Sikh genocide of 1984, and the decade of disappearances requires sustained and deliberate effort. For the most part, the high-level individuals who planned and executed the violence and discrimination, all intended to devastate the Sikh community, continue to enjoy their impunity for their misdeeds. Some of the same government actors have been tied to Indian transnational repression against Sikhs and Sikh communities in the United States, Canada, and elsewhere throughout the diaspora. Last year, the Sikh Coalition published a local advocacy toolkit related to the 40th anniversary of 1984 and joined other Sikh organizations in supporting a congressional resolution on the same subject. This year, we expect to take commemorative action around the 30th anniversary of the death of human rights activist Jaswant Singh Kalra, who was abducted and murdered in 1995 for his research on the decade of disappearances. We also continue to elevate and appreciate work like that of the 1984 Living History Project, which collects interviews of eyewitnesses and family members, and NSAF, which has researched extrajudicial killings and disappearances in the 10 years after 1984. More details on these projects, you can find the links at sikhcoalition.org. We must never forget the atrocities that took place in 1984 against the Sikh community. As such, there are different events going on around the globe all throughout this week and the month of June to remember those that were lost in this needless violence and these senseless attacks. One of these events will take place June the 7th at 10 a.m. in San Francisco, California, in the United States. The start time is 10 a.m. and the address is 88 2nd Street in San Francisco. At 12 noon, the event will continue to march in a sovereignty march or sovereignty rally going to the city center square. Between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m., guest speakers and human rights activists will address the crowd. If you are in the area, we strongly encourage you to take part in this event. Please also feel free to share any of the videos or images that you capture during that event with us. You can email them to messages@satagetv.com, or you can share them through our social media.
June 2024 marks 40 years since the state-sponsored attack on the Golden Temple Complex, the Akal Takht, and 40 other gurdwaras across Punjab, India. 40 years since the gruesome genocide unleashed upon the community, including the extrajudicial killings and forced disappearances of Sikhs, resulting in the deaths of thousands of the elderly, children, women, and men. 40 years since the large-scale destruction of the Sikh reference library and our histories. 40 years of the Sikh community's ongoing fight for justice. However, as we reflect on this period, it also marks 40 years of resilience and resistance within the community. It marks a period of unity and remembrance, rooted in the Sikh spirit of Chardhi Kala, high spirits. Let this somber time for the Sikh community serve as a reminder that despite the oppression and horrific violence endured, we will continue to remember and pray for those who were lost to this genocide, and we will continue to root ourselves in the love for justice. Never forget 1984.
So as you can see there, Angus, there are different events coming up. So again, at the end of the video, you saw that the big event in San Francisco on June the 7th at 10 a.m. starting at 88 2nd Street. It will go till about 12 o'clock noon at that location, where they will then proceed to rally and march on over to the City Civic Center and Square there from 2 till 4 p.m. A lot of speakers will acknowledge the crowd, will speak to them, and be available to interact, to answer questions and that. So if you are not of Sikh heritage, I still encourage you to get out there to show your support, and not only for the Sikh genocide, but all genocides in our history and ones that are going on today, to really stand together and show the Sikh community that even though we may not be Sikhs, we still stand with the entire community, and we will ensure that the memories of those martyrs and the others lost are never forgotten, Angus.
Indeed. I'm always very encouraged to see how the Sikh community never forgets. And this reminds me of a comment that one of our commenters in our audience made just a little while ago, is that Sikhs never forget. And it's true, they don't. And this is rightly so, because, of course, this period in 1984 was just so significant. It's had such an impact on the community. Of course, there are many alive now, and families alive in the older generations who were, of course, either there or directly affected by the events of what happened in 1984, whether it was June or November. And of course, as a result of that, the Sikh community does rally around every year on round about June the 1st to June the 5th, that sort of period of time. And there are all these events. And there's no sign of it going away, which actually is really, really encouraging. It means that it implies, firstly, that the Sikh community does never forget indeed. But secondly, it means that India, perpetually, every year, India must be wincing, thinking, oh God, here we go again. You know, they will never let us forget this. No, you're absolutely right. We will never let you forget this until atonement, in whatever that atonement is formed, in what form it takes. But ultimately, it will never be forgotten, because it was so important, what the events that happened and the surrounding, the context of why it happened, again, I think will only ever be assuaged when Khalistan is actually established. That, to me, the only compensation that India could ever grant the Sikh people in atonement for the events of 1984, whether it was the attack on the Darbar Sahib or the genocide in November, the only atonement that I think is satisfactory for the Sikh community is the establishment of Khalistan. That will go a long way to saying we are sorry for what we did to you as a people, and that, to me, I think is the goal that every Sikh should really work towards. Because to me, it's just clear, and I think the British government likewise has that same, I suppose, responsibility, and that should have that same goal as again, recompense, not just for the British Empire, but for the ongoing oppression, this subtle oppression that the British government have been imposing upon even our own Sikh community here in the UK, James. So yeah, as I say, I am still very encouraged to see that these events are even growing in number, I would say.
Yeah, and growing in number from outside of the diaspora as well, which is encouraging, because it shows that people are learning about the history of the world and our our neighbors, our friends, our community, our families, because we are all one big family trying to get together and work on making this planet Earth better. And that means that humanity needs to be shown for everybody. And with that said, of course, we need to also just really push the narrative in terms of getting this information and educating people. So we encourage you, our viewers, if you've never shared one of our videos, I encourage you to share this episode with as many people as you can. Put it on your Facebook links and such, so that this way people can learn about it, because this is such an important time of Sikh history that the world needs to be aware of. Angus?
Absolutely right. And talking of which, as part of my sort of stories that I'm going to cover, I'm going to particularly focus on what happened here in the UK over the weekend, actually, to celebrate. Again, I keep using this word, it's totally the wrong word. To commemorate the events of 1984. And London, of course, was the focal point of what went on here to remember 1984. And I do remember that essentially a year ago, almost to the day, covering almost the same story, which actually, again, is worth covering, because mainstream media here in the UK are increasingly waking up and taking notice of issues affecting the Sikh community. And of course, 1984 being what it is, that the gatherings to, again, I keep using this word, celebrate, to commemorate, I've got to imprint this on my mind, the events gathering to commemorate 1984 are actually finding their way onto mainstream news. And I'm going to play you, and I guess a few people who have access to Sky News will have hopefully seen this news report. It's only a couple of minutes long, but for those of you who don't get access to Sky, this is Sky's coverage of the events over the weekend in London. It's fantastic. Have a look at this.
Never forget! 84! Never forget!
An annual tradition in London. Thousands flock to the capital today to commemorate Operation Bluestar, the darkest period in modern-day Sikh history. In June 1984, Indian forces stormed the Golden Temple, the holiest Sikh shrine in Amritsar, where armed separatists had taken refuge. The assault ended in bloodshed, with hundreds of civilians killed. 41 years on, this tragedy still strikes a deep chord with British Sikhs. In 2014, secret documents revealed that the government at the time under Margaret Thatcher sent a military officer to help guide the Indian government with the attack. Another memo stressed there should be no leak about the visit. If there were, it would be extremely embarrassing for both sides. And if the leak sprang from us, the Indians would never forgive us. The Conservatives have maintained that the UK's role in the attack was purely advisory and limited, but with many files still classified, the Sikh community are demanding full transparency.
I do believe in the British system, and I don't think they would have got involved if they had known that India was the aggressor.
Without justice, there's no closure. Simple as that, and that's what we're here for.
We're just begging for somebody to listen and to give us redemption.
Whilst in opposition, Labour made multiple promises for an independent inquiry, including in their 2017 and 19 manifestos, a public letter from Sir Keir Starmer as leader of opposition in 2022, and a social media post from the now Deputy Prime Minister a month before last year's general election. 11 months into power, no official update.
It's unacceptable that they made promises and they're silent. I think our message to Labour is it will be seen as an act of betrayal, and we will never forgive.
We need to get to the bottom of it.
The highest profile Sikh MP is feeling hopeful.
Conversations that I've had with ministers, with others in number 10 as well, and that's what I've been told, is that it is under consideration. This is an issue that is just not going to go away, and the government needs to deliver on that inquiry.
What we want to know is what was the role of our government?
Back in London, a similar message. Amrit Singh Man, Sky News, Central London.
Okay, so a few interesting sort of, I suppose, takeaways from that report. Firstly, and the one that really hits me is compare and contrast that report to what you would see in India. Would you ever see a report like that in India? Of course you wouldn't. That is a report really holding the government to account, saying, you've made all these promises, why aren't you delivering? It's asking all the uncomfortable questions that Starmer's government, if any members of the government watched that report, they'll be squirming in their seats thinking, OK, this is slightly embarrassing, that we are being held to account and the public are clearly getting behind these questions, these uncomfortable questions. You would never see a report really like that in India that would actually hold Narendra Modi's government to such an account. So again, that's a contrast between how a real democracy operates and a real free press operates compared to how it operates in India. Anyway, apart from that, many other takeaways, including how many Khalistan flags did we see there? Loads and loads, a great sea of Khalistan flags. Is it a fringe movement? Well, not judging by that, I would say. I think it's very, very clear how powerful the Khalistan movement is amongst the Sikh community. And I would say even those who weren't carrying Khalistan flags, even if there's a level of indifference, it's probably because they've got more important things in their lives to think about and worry about. But given the chance to vote on it, they probably would vote for a yes, we want Khalistan. So again, that issue raises its wonderful head yet again. Likewise, I think there was a huge focus on this inquiry and British involvement into the events of 1984. What did the British military do? What did the British government do to advise and assist the Indian government in that attack on the Darbar Sahib? We don't know. The British government, and certainly Cameron, the last Conservative government under Cameron, said, well, we've investigated it. There's nothing there. We've released accidentally, as it turned out, half the files. There's nothing there to worry about. We weren't involved. There might have been a little bit of advice, but other than that, no, that was it. Well, it's the age-old sort of accusation. Well, release all the files then. What have you got to, if there's nothing to hide, what have you got to fear then? So release the rest of the documents, and yet they will not. They will not, so far, hold this inquiry, despite, as again, this wonderful report went on, they will not launch this inquiry. Starmer and his government are utterly silent on this inquiry. They've not mentioned it since all those promises that both Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, and Starmer himself, the Prime Minister, made in opposition. There it was in black and white, as the wonderful Sky News report highlighted. You've made these promises, why aren't you delivering on them? So, James, I think, first of all, Very positive takeaways on that is that, once again, huge turnout in London. Great mainstream media coverage. Sky News is one of our mainstream news channels. And again, a Sikh reporter, a fabulous report from that young Sikh reporter, interviewing Tan Desai, again, one of our mainstream, in fact, our longest serving Sikh MPs for the Labour Party. But I have to say, look, mate, Tan Desai, the Labour MP, come on, you need to be throwing your weight around a little bit more, because Starmer is not listening to you in any way, shape or form. You need to start being a little bit more belligerent, I would say, as a backbencher, and start pushing Sikh affairs, and particularly these promises that your party made. Why aren't they being delivered? You need to be knocking on your boss's door on a regular basis. If you truly stand by your values, if you truly stand by your community, then you would risk your very own career stamping on Starmer's door until he opens it and answers it. And yet, you're being a little bit too diplomatic, a little bit too pussyfooted, with all due respect on this. You should be pushing a little bit harder on this. This is what you were voted into power for, and this is why you should be delivering on your promises. But anyway, sorry, Tan, to advocate you on that. But unfortunately, this government is not delivering. And as per yesterday's report, Debindajit Singh in The Guardian saying, look, if Labour don't deliver, we'll go elsewhere. So, Tan, I think you need to tell your colleagues that they're going to lose the support of the community unless they deliver on this inquiry into British involvement in 1984. So there you go, James. Great coverage from the UK. It is spreading, and I'm very, very encouraged to see that mainstream media, year after year, is increasingly so, I have to say, covering these events, and then in turn asking the questions: why did it happen? What was it all about? What did it mean? What are these Khalistan flags? What is this Khalistan you're talking about? Why is India actually not quite as democratic as we thought it was? The uncomfortable questions, James.
So as I was trying to say before I muted myself, is that, the world is getting much smaller when it comes to the media landscape and the ability for everybody to look at news from different regions. And that's becoming more important as people are trying to find the truth in media. I'm very familiar with Sky News and the amazing job they do on reporting on many issues of global interest. And I mean, the other day, even one of your newspapers there, The Guardian, Angus, was on one of the network TV shows. They were referencing a historical event, and they actually on the episode brought up an article of The Guardian. And I thought, wow, that's really cool, because it shows just how far-reaching the media landscape is when it comes to the global impact. And again, not to repeat myself, but it just shows, if people are watching this program from around the world, if people share it, then again, we can educate the world, not just the small little pockets of area that we live in, Angus.
Absolutely right, indeed. So, but as I say, I'm very encouraged to see that these events aren't just not going away. They are increasing. They seem to be increasing in size, increasing in attendance, and increasing in profile. Is that more and more people outside the community are seeing them. This is what really matters. This is how things will change.
That's right.
And as I say, the uncomfortable questions are being asked is because more and more people outside the community are saying, what is this all about? Who are these people marching in our streets? What are they marching about? So the impact is far-reaching. This is why all of us must get out there, attend, be seen, get those Khalistan flags out, and make sure that the world knows and asks those uncomfortable questions. Right, James, let's move on to my second story. And this is, again, related to all this, but this is quite an interesting story that came out of India just over the last day or so. And the BJP and the Congress Party, the two main parties that operate in India. Of course, BJP currently in power. The Congress Party, of course, represented by the Gandhi dynasty. And of course, it was Congress who were in power in 1984 at that time. And it turned out that 2 or 3 days ago, to mark the 41st anniversary of the terrible attack on the Darbar Sahib, the BJP, the local party in Punjab, posted up on social media accounts a tribute to those who died over those few days, and particularly those who died on day one. Now, the significance of this was the terminology, the language they used. They referred to those who died as shaheeds, shahidan, martyrs. Now, this is a big step. It's a simple word and it's a little word, but it carries with it a huge amount of importance, because by saying that they were martyred, it of course implies that they have given their lives for a great thing, and that there is a guilty party clearly behind why they were murdered. In other words, it's actually pointing the finger of accusation at the Indian state, saying you martyred these innocent people. So this is the BJP actually coming out and saying, yes, we recognise these people as martyrs. This is the first time publicly that the BJP, and in fact any mainstream Indian politician or party, has publicly acknowledged those who died as martyrs in the Golden Temple, in the Darbar Sahib. So it does carry a huge amount of significance. However, the post was retracted 3 hours later. Now, the post itself, it said on the 1st of June 1984, Saka Bluestar. Now, Saka implies a cataclysmic or catastrophic event. And again, in itself, the usage of that word Saka is very significant. They acknowledge again how catastrophic this event was, Bluestar was. So it says, Saka Bluestar, humble tribute to all the martyrs of day one of the attack on Darbar Sahib by the Congress government. And then it also used pictures of the terrible damage that was wreaked on the Akal Takht, and armoured vehicles with tyres blown out, watched by 3 soldiers. It called the army action on the attack on the Darbar Sahib. It was not a first for the Punjab BJP. The Prime Minister Modi apparently did in 2023 in Parliament he had referred to this attack on the Darbar Sahib. So again, it becomes slightly political here. Where it's been politically expedient or convenient, they have referred to this attack on the Darbar Sahib, but they've never used this word martyr. That is actually a big shift, and likewise the term Saka is also new for the BJP. Now, of course, the Sikh community have been using this word Shaheed since day one. Of course, they've always acknowledged those who died as Shaheeds, as martyrs. But of course, by the local BJP party posting this up on social media, it appears to cause a bit of a storm internally with the BJP. Clearly, there are those in headquarters in Delhi who've seen this post and say, whoa, no, we can't say this publicly. This acknowledges the fact that, yes, we were in the wrong, the Indian state was in the wrong, and that the innocent victims were, of course, those who died. We mustn't say that, because, of course, the narrative all the way through, since 1984, the mainstream narrative has used the words like, well, the attack was the, quote, only option left, or the attack was unavoidable. In other words, they paint Bhindranwale and his followers and all those who died, even the innocents, as the guilty parties. The Indian state was the innocent party. They had no choice but to launch this attack on the Darbar Sahib. So, by using the terminology of Shaheed, martyrs, they're actually flipping that the other way around. Actually, they're saying the guilty party is the Indian state, and the innocents were those who died in the Darbar Sahib. So again, BJP headquarters in Delhi must have had an absolute fit when they discovered this post on social media. They must have sent the instructions out to the local Punjabi party and saying that you've got to withdraw this immediately. This is embarrassing. But what, as the story runs, the Times of India ran this story. And they sort of gave it, I would say, a fairly relatively objective perspective on what had happened. But clearly, what they have pointed out was the politics, how 1984, the attack of the Darbar Sahib, has become a bit of a political football. It has been used by the BJP over and over again to attack the Congress party. They don't care really about what actually happened in 1984. They don't really care about those who died. They just use it because it is a convenient attack weapon to attack the Congress party, because of course it was Congress party that were in charge. They were the government at the time. It was the Congress party, Gandhi's government, who were behind Operation Bluestar. So of course the BJP is a gift to the BJP politically. So the BJP can forevermore attack their political enemies, the Congress party, by saying you were responsible for 1984. This was your mistake. This was your mess. And so they've been using it politically. But in the same breath, they will never actually quite admit the guilt of the Indian state. And so, of course, it has become a convenient political football to kick around. And the Congress Party have likewise tried to defend themselves, saying, oh, well, you know, it was Gandhi. And they've tried to turn it back on the BJP government in ways that they can. But, of course, they're not standing on two legs in this argument. So, again, sadly, it has been used as political football. It is a tool of convenience. It's not a real acknowledgement. The Indian government, whether it's BJP and certainly not Congress, have never actually really acknowledged how bad this event was. They've never really acknowledged the guilt of the Indian state or the guilt really of Indira Gandhi and how evil Operation Bluestar was and really what was behind it. It really was just a complete and utter attempt to totally destroy and bury not just the secessionist movement, but also the people, the heart of the Sikh people. That was the evil of what Operation Bluestar was. And in the context of that, Operation Shanti. And I would just point out one other element in this Times article, which actually I found very interesting. It actually it refers to, and it was a quote that said, the Akaltak was attacked, and it is still in our memory. They became habituated from Mizoram, and due to this, they went on to attack the Akaltak. Now, in 1966, and this is, I didn't know much about this, and maybe I'll even do an article on this in the next few days. Mizoram in Assam, there was an independence, a militant independence movement. Yes, in 1966, just less than 20 years after partition, there was a group of people fighting for the independence of an area of Assam. Yes, James, we talk about all these secessionist movements, whether it was the Tamils, whether of course it's J&K and Punjab. All these areas have been fighting since 1947 for their independence, and they have been brutally, in turn, brutally squashed by the Brahmins, by this colonial control of India that perpetuates even today. In Mizoram in 1966, the Indian government once again sent in the troops and the air force. They brutally suppressed this brief rebellion, for this brief cry of freedom, this brief democratic cry, give us our freedom, and they squashed it militarily, brutally. They killed a lot of people who were fighting for their independence in Mizoram in 1966. There's another one, James, for us to take a look at. Yes, India is bubbling all the way across the whole subcontinent with these independence movements, because nobody, or very few people, other than the Hindus, very few people are happy under this artificial construct of modern-day India that was given to the Brahmins by the British Empire. Again, even under the British Empire, it was this forcibly collected, colonially controlled collection of independent cultures and peoples under the banner of India. That is what it remains today. This is why there are all these little independence movements all over India, crying for their own freedom of expression, crying for their own independence. And Khalistan is just but one of many of these. And it is only a matter of time, as we often say, James, that these dominoes will start to fall. You can only hold things together for a limited amount of time. Just look at the Soviet Union. It only can last a finite amount of time. This is why we know that Khalistan is coming, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's face it, I would not want to be the person that was sitting at that computer that posted that out there, because I'm sure that there were a lot of pissed off parliamentarians in India when they saw that, including Modi. And one other warning, folks, is don't let AI do your work for you without proofreading it. It would not surprise me if that's how it happened, because, yeah, you know that was retracted as quick as they could. But again, the cat's out of the bag, as they say. We know the truth, and it's great, mistakenly or not. It's good to see the BJP coming out and admitting the truth. Directly or indirectly, we'll take that as a win, because, hey, it shows that, if they're using AI or just somebody within their party social media team, the truth is there. So we just got to keep plugging away until we get them to admit it, acknowledge it, and start getting their asses in gear to go after those who are responsible, that are still alive. They are, if they're still alive, prosecute them, period. There's no reason why people have not been held accountable yet. And that is an atrocity. When you look at whether it's Khalistan, whether it's Jammu and Kashmir, I mean, there's got to be referendums, and the time has come that I think, well, it's long overdue. And I mean, you can go back even with Kashmir as They were supposed to have a referendum there and a plebiscite decades ago, according to the UN, and that never took place either. So, let's keep the pressure on and make India hold themselves accountable to the people that they supposedly represent, Angus.
And that is why we exist, to keep India held to account for those events of 1984 and other dreadful atrocities since. So, James, on that note, let's move on to our comments column. And at the end of last week, my podcast with Dr. Graywell, we talked about, it was titled Ungrateful India, and we looked in detail at various figures, high-profile Sikh figures particularly. And it did follow on from the dreadful treatment of an Indian colonel, Colonel Qureshi, a Muslim, who was insulted quite outrageously, who was basically slandered by another Indian politician. For no apparent reason other than the fact that she was a woman and from the Islamic community. She was the basic insult was she was sent out to talk to her fellow sister. They sent out the Muslim was sent a fellow sister, effectively tarnishing her as a terrorist or a friend of terrorists, and it really did upset a lot of people. But likewise, in the context of how the high-profile Sikhs have been treated, and the ingratitude that the Indian state and the Indian nation has treated its high-profile Sikhs, and by that we included Manmohan Singh, the former Prime Minister, and we referred to the Indian officer, Sabeg, I think his name was, who fought alongside Bhindranwale in the events of 1984, likewise, who were treated so badly. And as a result of that, we did get loads of comments, of course, some pretty unhappy comments about, how appalling that treatment was. TC, one of our regulars, of course, waded in straight away, saying absolutely right. And as TC said, it's just not worth Sikhs putting their lives on the line for India. It's a complete waste of time. You're viewed as an object to be used and abused, discarded when you've been useful, and whether you're male or female. And Manmohan Singh, Dr. Singh, likewise, despite his political prowess, he was actually one of the highest achieving prime ministers of modern times for India, but he wasn't even afforded the respect of a state funeral. Absolutely, we said this at the time, we reported this on the time, despite the fact that he was probably the best PM India have had to date. And again, yes, James, I think this is so symbolic of how India, the Indian state, and particularly the ruling Brahmanical elite, how they view Sikhs. They're useful when we need them, but as soon as we've finished using them, we don't want to know. We'll abuse them quite happily. We don't care about them. In fact, the only care that the Brahmins have of the Sikhs is just to get rid of them because they form this existential threat to their control of India. So yeah, James, it's pretty appalling. I would say Ungrateful India wraps it up perfectly.
Absolutely. It takes you to the old adage, what have you done for me lately? And that's essentially summing that up just perfectly, I believe.
Indeed. And Kulwant Kaur follows the same thing, and digging into the inner core of Hindutva. The message to all the minorities, and in fact, not even just the minorities, even the Hindus, the majority, everybody, whether you're Muslim, Christian, Sikh, even a Hindu, you need to wake up, get educated to what's happening to India. And this is why we exist, Kulwant. This is why we're here, is to try and spread the truth of what is going on in India. People, even especially amongst the Hindu population, who are so inured by the propaganda that is churned out by the Indian media on a daily basis, domestically, is the truth never really gets out. People don't realise this prison, this caste system that still very much exists, and that the Indian population are being held in poverty or relative poverty. There is a growing middle class, but ultimately you are still beholden to the ruling elite of India, who are basically controlling India through this caste system, these invisible bars of this prison. They are holding India back from what it could be. And people need to wake up. This is why we exist, Kulwant, rightly so. This is why James and I talk about this and rant about it on a regular basis, because we are so frustrated that people will not wake up to what is going on in India. This include in that people here in the West, particularly our governments, will not publicly acknowledge that India is a failing democracy, James.
Absolutely. And let's face it, I mean, there's a lot of misdirection out there. And that is one of the issues that we see is that every time people start to get it loud and into the media and in the forefront to educate and wake people up, then of course the Hindutva media machine and the BJP media machine really tries to drown out the truth with all of their background noise. And a quick, perfect example of that, Angus, is that as we see all of the news coming up on, the memories of 1984, right now there's certain Hindu newspapers and other publications that are actually trying to push this silly TikTok theme and challenge of people crying on the internet. And it's like, okay, are they trying to do that so that people aren't paying attention to the actual, real, true, raw emotion of people that are talking about 1984 at this time? Just wondering, because they like to try to push that narrative and deceive and get you looking elsewhere, Angus.
Yeah, it's pretty offensive, and it just makes a mockery of what actually happened. If you want something to cry about, really have a look at the genuine events of 1984. That really will bring tears to your eyes.
That's right.
There also followed, there was a couple of quite good discussions, let's call it euphemistically. They were quite interesting debates, should we say, on beneath this video. Killer 3 started quite a lengthy one off by saying, Sikhs made India what it is today, the same way an ant made the Empire State Building. Well, of course, one of the things that Dr. Grewal said, well, look, the massive contribution that the Sikh community, the Sikh people have made to India is enormous. India would not be what it is today without the Sikh people, because, of course, the Sikhs were in the vanguard primarily of fighting for independence. It was the Sikhs who disproportionately gave literally their lives in that fight for independence, much more so than any other community in India. And so, of course, what India is today is as a direct result of the Sikh sacrifice. But clearly Killer disagrees. And S. Baines came immediately back and said, no, the British created India. Sikhs fought the wars to preserve India for the British as well. So, the Sikhs even stood up for the British to create the British version of India. And in the end, they even fought for the Brahmins. But why? What was the point? The country is a joke. And then you refer to the Empire State as just a marvel of architecture in its time. But India was a concept of British minds. In other words, it is an artificial construct that required the use of Sikh soldiers and their sacrifices. Absolutely right. Killer came back, and this is I've just selected a few of a very, very long debate about this, but Killer came back and said, it's impressive how clueless people are with history. How can Britain make something that is literally written long before Britain existed? You can even go into British Museum, and there's even a section called Ancient India. Well, what I would say, Killer, is I think you just really don't understand the situation, and really the argument is that India itself, even the word India, it's an artificial construct. It was created by the British Empire. You go back to the time of the Mughals, you go back several centuries, and it was just this wide, disparate collection of peoples. India is a modern construct. India was created by the British Empire. It was passed to the Brahmins in 1947. It still remains an artificial construct, a modern construct. India basically was created in 1947. That's really what it's all about. This ancient India that you refer to is something totally different. And MJ finalised the debate by saying, Sikhs have an impressive history of fighting against oppression. They particularly fought against the oppression of the Mughals and the British. You are proving the point of this video with your comment. Again, I couldn't really put it better. Is that Killer? Unfortunately, I don't really think you understand the concept of what is going in modern day India is that it is a colonial rule. It was colonial rule under the British. Again, it was an artificial boundary, an artificial geographical construct of the British, which was passed to the Brahmins, who even to this day essentially colonially control this different collection of completely disparate communities of different people and different cultures. How many languages, for example? Let me ask you that question. How many languages are there in India? So many, we can almost not even count them. And that in itself speaks volumes, James.
It speaks volumes in many languages, Angus. And I mean, you can look at the independence as different nations broke away from the UK and from British rule. Canada, the US, and many others. And then there was the Revolutionary Wars. There were wars between the British and the French. But do you know what? If you go back in history, almost all of the wars that took place, you'll find the Sikhs were there from the unity point where different nations started to work together. And that can go back to the Sikh Empire long before British colonization of India. So again, you can try to, readjust timelines all you want, but the facts are the facts, the truth is the truth, and history cannot be rewritten because it is what it is.
Indeed. And one of the comments that almost made it into Critics' Corner, and I thought, no, I'm not going to humiliate Kellogg for this person's comment. Because it was, I would say, a pretty awful comment. Please work on your English accent. It's terrible. Well, I thought my English accent was very good, James.
Maybe he's talking to me, Angus.
No, in reality, of course, I'm being slightly cynical there. Of course, he was referring to Dr. Grewal's accent. Well, and again, a lot of people, and these two comments are the only printable comments I could actually put up on here, because most of the comments were quite rude back at Kellogg. And Stay Safe said, look, what's that going to do with anything? Come on, you can be rude and mean, but Indians have accents too. Let's not go there. In other words, if you talk in your Indian accent, it's probably even worse. And Kuldip Kaur says, it's not his mother tongue. How many languages do you speak? So again, I think these are very polite ripostes to Kellogg. And likewise, my comment back to Kellogg is, come on, the guy is his second language. He speaks it pretty much fluently. How wonderful it would be if we could all speak many languages in a perfect accent of that language. So unfortunately, I think your comment was met with the wave of opprobrium, there's a word, a wave of rudeness back to you, for saying basically, don't be so damn rude. And then final set, James. Shivraj Sandhu says, thank you for bringing this gentleman on the show. Oh, it was an absolute pleasure. Dr. Singh has told the bitter truth about the treatment of minorities and of course, the Dalits, the lowest caste, by this society that basically hates them and is so ungrateful. Of course, it is the Brahmin, the ruling class, the upper caste who are responsible for this, who has a total control of all the institutions of government. It is shameful. It is disgusting. Now, what's important about this comment is India has a very bleak future if it does not mend its ways and gives every citizen respect, equality and dignified life. Now, the importance of this comment is absolutely right, this prediction. And we say this regularly, James. India faces, indeed, a bleak future. It thinks it is facing this wonderfully positive superpower future. Well, it isn't. I'm telling you, and I'm warning India, if you do not change your ways, if you do not become a more genuinely democratic nation that follows the norms of the rule of law, then you will break apart. If you do not recognise your individual parts, and by that I include, of course, Khalistan, J&K, all these different parts, if you do not acknowledge their democratic rights, if you do not treat your minorities with a lot more respect and equality, then you are facing a very predictable future. And by that, James, of course, I'm looking at the Soviet Union. Look at what happened to the Soviet Union.
Absolutely. And I mean, let's face facts that India's got a lot to work on. And that means treating their people with respect, because right now, the working industry or the labor pool and the intelligence and educated are fleeing India for other countries to be able to make an income to support their families back home. So in turn, they are exporting a commodity, which is their own people who are sending money back to support India. So again, the more that you fail to support the minorities or any part of your population, the more you push them away and the less they want to put money back into the Indian economy as well from foreign regions.
Indeed, and I liked Kaur's comments so much that I put it in twice, and it is so relevant even to this current conversation. Digging into the inner core, the big message for all the minorities is get out there, wake up, educate yourself to what is happening in India, because you are on this path to inevitable breakup. And there's only one way you can stop that, and that is to recognise the democratic rights of individuals, and then let democracy take its course. And the chips will fall in the way that they will fall, peacefully, democratically, and happily. And Stay Safe has the final word of the show. And I love this word, Chardikala. Stay Safe says, keep it up, Chardikala. Keep morale up. You're wasting time, breath and cellular energy trying to make us change. We're not backing down. The Chardi Kala is so high. This is a fabulous way to end the show, James. This is saying that our feelings of well-being, of happiness, positive energy is absolutely positively fizzing. This is what's happening. This is why the Khalistan movement is riding so high, is because the Chardi Kala is fizzing with absolute bubbling energy of happiness and an absolute inevitability that good things are on the horizon, James.
Absolutely. And a special shout out to stay safe there. Thank you very much for all of your comments. We love that you are so engaged, and same with other regular commenters as well. Thanks for being so engaged with us.
Indeed, and Chardi Kala is always high here on Perspectives, so do keep your comments coming in and let's keep that level of Chardi Kala up as high as we can. So don't forget to keep these comments coming in. There have been some brilliant comments. Unfortunately, we're always restricted on time. We could do a whole show on the comments because there have been some really interesting ones. But also let us know anything that you'd like us to talk about, bring to our attention that we should know about, as many of you have been doing. And of course, you can message us directly at message@satellitedtv.com. As many indeed have been doing so as well. So keep those emails and those messages coming in. But that is it for another day. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.